Well, JPMorgan Chase announced plans yesterday to open 70 new branches.
JPMorgan executive accused of turning worker into a sex slave.
This week, the name JPMorgan is everywhere. Millions of people are searching it. It's trending on every platform. Everyone suddenly wants to know about this company. But what should most people Googling JPMorgan riots really be looking at? An alleged sex scandal? Or the story of JPMorgan Chase, the most powerful bank on earth? And it starts with one man born in 1837, who by the time he died had personally built General Electric, US Steel, saved the American economy from total collapse twice, and accumulated so much power that the United States government had to create an entirely new institution just to make sure no single man could ever hold that much power again. That institution became the Federal Reserve, and the bank he founded became JPMorgan Chase, the largest bank in the world by market capitalization as of 2026. Today, it holds $4.4 trillion in assets. It operates worldwide. It finances governments, corporations, and millions of ordinary people's lives simultaneously. One man built the foundation of all of it. His name was John Pierpont Morgan, and this is the story of his empire that so many people are applying to work for after the scandal broke out. John Pierpont Morgan was born on April 17, 1837, in Hartford, Connecticut, into one of the most distinguished families in New England. His grandfather Joseph was a co-founder of Aetna Insurance. His father Junius was a partner in one of the largest dry goods businesses in Hartford. His mother Juliet was the daughter of a celebrated poet and minister. On paper, John was born with every advantage. In reality, his childhood was defined by something nobody expected from a boy of his background: profound physical fragility. I mean, this boy had it rough growing up. John was a sickly child who suffered seizures and mysterious ailments that doctors couldn't diagnose. He spent long periods sheltered at home, unable to attend school, confined while his peers played and competed and built the friendships that would shape their early lives. When he was healthy enough, his parents took him to art galleries and concerts, sparking a lifelong obsession with beauty and culture that would one day produce one of the greatest private art collections in human history. As a teenager, John suffered a serious illness so severe it required a long convalescence in the Azores, the Portuguese islands off the Atlantic coast, where he spent months recovering far from home, far from family, far from everything familiar. These years of illness and isolation did something to John Pierpont Morgan that no classroom education could have produced. They gave him an almost remarkable calmness in the face of crisis. A man who spent his childhood genuinely uncertain whether he would survive to adulthood develops a different relationship with risk than most people. In 1854, his father Junius moved the family to London to become a partner in the banking firm of George Peabody and Company, one of the most prestigious banking houses in the world. John was 17. He was enrolled in schools in Switzerland and then Germany, where he became fluent in both French and German and received a mathematical education at the University of Göttingen, so strong that one of his professors urged him to pursue an academic career. John declined. He was going to be a banker, like his father and his grandfather before him. He returned to the United States at age 20 and began work as a clerk at Duncan, Sherman & Company in New York, the American branch of his father's firm. Within 2 years, while traveling in the Caribbean to study the sugar and cotton markets, he spotted a ship captain with a cargo of coffee and no buyer. Without authorization, he used his company's funds to purchase the entire cargo, then sold it to local merchants at a profit. His employers were furious and secretly very impressed. John Pierpont Morgan had just demonstrated the instinct that would define his entire career: the willingness to act decisively when everyone else was frozen, and the confidence to bet everything on his own judgment. That comes from a man not promised tomorrow and certain in his own intuition. By 1861, at just 24 years old, Morgan opened his own firm, J. Pierpont Morgan & Company, operating out of a single room at 53 Exchange Place in Lower Manhattan. The American Civil War was breaking out, and while it disrupted most businesses, Morgan saw opportunities in the chaos. He traded in foreign exchange. He underwrote government bonds. He built relationships with every major financial institution in New York, while simultaneously leveraging his father's deep connections in London to access European capital that most American bankers couldn't touch. By his early 30s, Morgan stood well over 6 feet tall with powerful shoulders. penetrating eyes, and what everyone who met him described as the unmistakable air of a man born to command. And he was about to find the industry that would make him the most powerful private citizen in American history: railroads. In the 1870s and 1880s, America's railroad industry was a disaster. It was plagued by overbuilding, fierce competition, reckless financial speculation, and a culture of executives who prioritized short-term price wars over long-term stability. The chaos contributed to multiple financial panics and destroyed billions in investor capital. Morgan looked at this chaos the same way Rockefeller had looked at the oil industry and saw the same solution: eliminate the chaos, impose order, control everything. His strategy was surgical. His firm would acquire financially distressed or bankrupt railroad lines, often for pennies on the dollar, inject new capital, replace old management with handpicked teams, implement strict cost controls, and facilitate agreements between competing lines to reduce the destructive rate wars that were killing everyone. The process became known on Wall Street simply as Morganization. By 1902, Morgan controlled roughly 5,000 miles of American railroads, a network so vast it reshaped the economic geography of the entire country. But the railroads were just the beginning. By the 1890s, Morgan had accumulated enough capital and enough influence to do something no banker before him had ever attempted. In 1892, Morgan arranged the merger of Thomas Edison's Edison General Electric Company with its rival Thomson Houston Electric, creating General Electric. The move brought stability to the rapidly growing and chaotic electric industry, and GE went on to become one of the most important corporations in American history. Edison himself had wanted to keep his company independent. Morgan overruled him. Then came the most audacious deal in the history of American business. In 1901, Morgan engineered the formation of the United States Steel Corporation, the world's first billion-dollar company. He purchased Andrew Carnegie's entire steel empire for $480 million, more money than the entire annual budget of the United States government at the time, and merged it with Federal Steel and National Steel to create a vertically integrated giant that controlled a massive portion of American steel production. When the deal was done, Carnegie reportedly told a friend that he should have asked for $100 million more. Morgan, who had not flinched at a single dollar of it, simply replied that he would have paid it. Morgan was basically a badass. In 1902, Morgan then financed the merger of several agricultural equipment companies to form International Harvester, bringing the same order to the farm equipment industry that he had imposed on railroads and steel. Through his partners and holdings, Morgan held controlling interests in Aetna, Western Union, the Pullman Car Company, and 21 separate railroad lines. The partners of JPMorgan Company and their affiliate banks controlled aggregate resources of $22 billion, a sum that is compared to the total value of all property in the 22 states west of the Mississippi River. One man had more economic power than half a continent. The government was watching and growing very nervous. And everyone knows when the government is watching you, some scary shit is about to happen. Then came the moment that defined JP Morgan's legacy forever. October 1907. The American company was showing signs of weakness through the summer. Then in October, the respected Knickerbocker Trust in New York City failed, touching off a catastrophic chain of events. Stock market prices plummeted. Depositors made massive runs on banks across the country pulling out cash. The US Treasury pumped millions into weak institutions in a desperate attempt to stop the bleeding. But it wasn't working, and the amount of collapsed institutions kept growing. The United States had no central bank, no Federal Reserve, no institutional mechanism for injecting cash into the financial system in a crisis. There was only one man with enough capital, enough connections, and enough authority to stop the collapse. That's right, it's our main man, JP. JP Morgan summoned the leading bankers and financial experts of America to his personal library on East 36th Street in Manhattan. For 3 weeks, they essentially lived there, working through the night, identifying which institutions could be saved and which couldn't, channeling money from the strong banks to the weak ones, and preventing the money grabs from spreading further. When a brokerage firm called Moore & Schlee threatened to collapse under the weight of its debts, which could have triggered a new wave of panic, Morgan proposed merging the Tennessee Coal, Iron, and Railroad Company with U.S. Steel. He sent his people directly to President Theodore Roosevelt, the same Roosevelt who had built his career attacking monopolies, and asked for legal immunity for the deal. Roosevelt granted it. The merger went through. Moore & Schlee was saved. By November 7, 1907, the panic was over. JPMorgan was hailed by many Americans as a true patriot, a selfless financial hero who had saved the country with his own resources and force of will. But others saw something more troubling. They were probably both jealous and scared of the amount of power he had to sway an entire country's finances. A private citizen had just single-handedly decided which American banks lived and which ones died. He had extracted a personal favor from the President of the United States as the price for saving the economy, and he had used the crisis to expand his own empire in the process. The panic of 1907 made one thing undeniable. The United States could not function with its financial system dependent on the goodwill of a single private banker. The following year of 1913, Congress began the process that would lead to the creation of the Federal Reserve System. America's central bank was born directly because of what JPMorgan had demonstrated, that without banking infrastructure, the entire economy was hostage to one man's decisions. The government created the Federal Reserve specifically so that no single private citizen could ever again hold the power that Morgan had held. The year the Federal Reserve was created, 1913, was also the year JPMorgan died. He died in Rome on March 31st, 1913, at the age of 75. The New York Stock Exchange closed for a period on the day of his funeral to honor him. His body was brought back to Hartford, Connecticut, the city where he had been born, and crowds lined the streets as the procession passed. When his will was read, even the wealthiest men of the era were stunned. His art collection alone, assembled over decades of obsessive acquisition, was estimated to be worth hundreds of millions of dollars. It filled his private library and 2 floors of the Metropolitan Museum of Art. His son Jack donated enormous portions of it to the Met, where it can still be seen today. John D. Rockefeller, the only man of the era who could genuinely claim to be wealthier than Morgan, looked at the inventory of his estate and reportedly said, "And to think he wasn't even a rich man." It was meant as an insult, but in a strange way, it was also true. Morgan's power had never really been about personal accumulation. It was about control over capital, over industry, over the fundamental mechanics of how America's economy functioned. He didn't need to own everything. He just needed everyone else to need him. His legacy was immediate and permanent. Although he twice bailed out the US Treasury, the very fact that he had been able to do so left the country deeply unsettled and directly spurred the creation of the Federal Reserve System. His name lives on through the massive international banking firm he created, which entered the 21st century as JPMorgan Chase. JPMorgan Chase is the largest bank in the United States and the world's largest bank by market capitalization as of 2026. It holds $4.4 trillion in assets. It employs over 318,000 people globally. It generated $78 billion in revenue from its commercial and investment bank alone in 2025. It is the #1 credit card issuer in the United States. It has been ranked in the top 10 of Fortune's most admired companies list 9 years in a row. The institution that one man built from a single room at 53 Exchange Place in Lower Manhattan through railroad empires, steel monopolies, financial crisis, government investigations, and 2 bailouts of the United States Treasury, is today the most powerful bank on earth. Every time you use a Chase credit card, every time you read about a billion-dollar corporate merger, every time a government needs to borrow money on international markets, the infrastructure JPMorgan built is somewhere in the background, still running. He didn't just build a bank, he built the architecture of modern American finance, and then forced the government to build an institution powerful enough to replace him. The name JPMorgan is in the headlines again this week for something super dumb.
Morgan executive accused of turning worker into a sex slave.
But the real story of that name, the story of the man who held more financial power than any private citizen in history, who saved America twice and terrified it once, who built General Electric and US Steel and the railroad network that forced the creation of the Federal Reserve. That story is the one worth knowing, because the scandal of the week will be forgotten. What JPMorgan built is still standing. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and don't forget to subscribe for a scoop of success.